Hello, good afternoon. My name is Claire Ngotam. Along with my colleague Sonia, we were moderating the discussion group on how to counter xenophobia and facilitate integration. It was very funny, even funny, and very excited, because we began with the question, what is xenophobia? So we asked the assistant, the participant, to give us their definition of xenophobia. And we now try to put this question further to those who were not in our group, just 2 seconds. From a person who was not in our group, do you have any definition of xenophobia? No, there is none. What? Okay, so we began with this question and we discussed it a while. Afterwards, we went to the inputs, and to finish with, we made working groups, 4 working groups. And from the groups, we had statements we want now to discuss with you. So you have seen on your place, you have small cards in different colors. Please take them. The card you have got on your place. We have put them on your places. We want to make the feedback interactive so that you don't fall asleep. Because we have worked out some solution, and now we want to check out whether you agree with our solution or whether you don't agree. So, I will put those statements through, and every time you agree, you will show a red card. No, yes, it's green card. Have you seen your green card? Yes, so if I put a statement, say I agree with this statement, you will show the card. And if you don't agree, you show the orange one. Yeah. And if you're like, I don't know, kind of in between, you show the blue card. Okay, and so the first statement, and very easy one, again, our assignment was to find solution or to find out ways how to counter xenophobia. And one idea is education. So education and trainings helps a lot to encounter xenophobia. Do you agree? Okay. Why do we always think education helps? I don't know. Okay, so I'm happy you agree with the group. Another one about integration, a very difficult one. A drink facilitates integration. Drinking together, drinking everything together. Go for a drink with each other. Oh, great. The same with food? Oh, you are like, okay, I want to have your idea. What do you mean? The microphone, we got microphone. No, but that's my time. That's in the time. Okay, so some agree about the drink, and then great big proposition were again about training and the interactivity between groups and amongst groups helps to prevent xenophobia or xenophobian violences. Some people said there's a clear need to have the it must happen on the political level. That was the first stage where we need to see things happen. Other thought maybe it's also a good thing to start with itself, with herself, also with oneself, not only waiting for the politician to do something, but also started with oneself. Okay, so that was the core of the discussion. Again, we had also networking exchanges, and yes, thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Michael. Allô. Ah, ok. Désolé pour le petit retard, on a beaucoup bavardé et on n'a pas eu le temps vraiment de se concentrer sur les rapports. Malheureusement, elle a écrit notre rapport en anglais, malgré que la modération était en français. Donc, je vais essayer de rester dans la même logique qu'elle, et en commençant par remercier les gens qui ont vraiment participé activement à ce panel. Et on a résumé le panel en 5 points. Le premier, c'est how to maintain and enhance the participation or the contribution of the African living in Europe to the African development also in time of crisis. And the point we came with diaspora perspective in Europe and Africa. The diaspora need to adopt and enhance and encourage initiatives like entrepreneurship development, which is a way to confront social and economic issues, which is basically will influence the political issues. And people come also with some great ideas like working on the education, entrepreneurship, on youth development, and lobbying for the young voices among government institutions in Africa and in Europe. To look how those good initiatives can join on one voice and sustain their work for the development, especially in time of crisis. The migration is not a problem. That was a very important point for us to say. And also, if we say that we should come with a voice to face things or to counter what we are living here means ADEPT should support the diaspora, the migrant, in doing this kind of job. South Africa, I think, Said, Beatrice, and she's working on it. She even gave to us the first link to go and check it. Thank you. What was important also was some people, some panelists share some good practice, like the Kenyan case. They are surrounded by 5 countries. They are always, we have always issues in this area, and they're still getting people, although they have terrorism and others. And she explained that after all those things, some went at the university and they contribute to the Kenyan society development, and that Europe can learn from this kind of activities. And another person talked about a very important point, what they are doing in France, to try to have a database of diaspora people, we are refugees and diaspora. We came to Europe to know what they can do, how we can use the potential they have. And she gave some example of organization. Maybe the other country will learn from this organization also. Thank you very much. That was the point. Sorry, I don't know if everybody can find the say inside this one, or if somebody want to add something we miss. Le fond. It's true. Thank you, Alexi. And we talk about to maintain our contribution, and some other people was talking about even to do more, to enhance it, and to be able to have our own bank of funds to go to do business in Africa, was it, or to do business here, back home, so that we can contribute to the African development, the development of Africa. Thank you very much, Sana. It was the only missing point. Thank you.
Thank you to Claire. Thank you, Yusuf. I hand over now to Marlin Frankenhäuser. She's the program manager in ICMPD, one of the supporters of today's event, or let's say the co-organizer of the ADEPT network together with AFORD. And she will be chairing the final panel on the way forward on supporting migration and development with politicians, with institutional delegates from European Commission and Kenya, Austria, Switzerland, from ADEPT, and from the Fundamental Rights Agency. Thank you, Marlin, please.
Thank you very much. Do I need to do something? No, now it works. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's also an honor to, wrap up such a rich discussion with this final panel discussion. And I would like to start on this way ahead, going back to our title of the full day, Migration and Development in Times of Crisis, Common Obligations and Collective Action. So these common obligations we have been discussing, examples of collective action, where is it that we will be heading now? Jibril said this morning, and it has probably been mentioned also elsewhere, that just last weekend, Friday, the Sustainable Development Goals were adopted, and for the first time really in the development discussion and development policy agenda globally, migration and migrants have been specifically mentioned and recognized. Their migrants' contributions to development is specifically mentioned in these goals, in these targets and indicators. For the next 15 years, this is the Global Development Agenda. And I would like that to be the overall framework and sort of the long-term perspective in thinking about the way ahead, especially as Jibril also mentioned, that in terms of looking at the typology of what crisis is, crisis has to be short-term. So where should we go, and how do we keep our focus, and how do we prioritize? What can the various institutions represented here do, and what is everybody's role to move forward? So I would like to give the floor to all of our distinguished panelists to introduce themselves and sort of contextualize their work with today's topic. So that is what each of these institutions and agencies represented here do on migration and development, or specifically on diaspora and diaspora engagement, and also on creating the enabling environment for migrants and diasporas to contribute, be it here or be it in Africa. So I would like to start with basically following the list that we have in our agenda with Mr. Robert Seiner from the Austrian Development Agency. Please.
Thank you very much. It's also a big pleasure for me to be here and to have this opportunity to discuss a very important issue, and in recent days, of course, a very burning issue. Austrian Development Cooperation. I'm coming from the Austrian Development Agency, which is the operational unit to implement bilateral Austrian development cooperation. So we are only partly implementing Austrian development cooperation. Our strategic oriented entity is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we are operationalizing the programs and projects. Austrian development cooperation recognizes that the development of a country has an effect on migration, as well as migration has an effect on the development of a country, and that this requires coherent and comprehensive responses. And therefore, the draft of the 3 years program, the actual draft from 2016 to 2018, the policy framework, so to say, for Austrian development cooperation includes as a priority area ensuring peace, human security, human rights, and migration as a priority topic. ADC already contributes to addressing the root causes for which persons have to flee or migrate to other countries, such as lacking peace and stability, poverty, difficult environmental and climate conditions, destruction of natural resources, lacking educational and economic opportunities, for example. And I would like to mention a few examples where we are already cooperating or having activities in that sense. Approximately 30 running projects with a total amount of 12 million euro are very directly linked to migration issues. For example, we are providing humanitarian aid since many years. Up to now, Austria has given 15 million euro for Syrian refugees and internally displaced persons in Iraq, Lebanon, Jordan, Turkey, and Syria itself. and supports internally displaced persons in the Ukraine. We are also contributing to reduce the number of refugees through the support of early warning systems, and we have a strong cooperation with IGAD in the Horn of Africa with the so-called sea-warn mechanism, which is a conflict, an early warning and response mechanism of IGAD, and which contributes to peace and security in the Horn of Africa.
The issue of a directorate for diaspora is relatively new, and it's about 5 years since it was started, and it was started because of the push of the Kenyan diaspora that lobbied for this office to be established as one of the directorates in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and it is a major government department. His Excellency the President, our President, recognized the Kenyan diaspora as one of the 48th county. Kenya has got 47 counties, so the 40th county of Kenya is the Kenyan diaspora, and this really shows the position of the Kenyan diaspora in our national development. Now, again, when we go to our foreign policy, one of the pillars of our Kenyan foreign policy is the Kenyan diaspora. And this is borne by the fact that the Kenyan diaspora is a major resource, and we have recognized this, and we are looking at the diaspora so that we can mainstream the diaspora into our national development. Basically, what we are doing is to ensure that we mainstream the Kenyan diaspora into national development. When I talk of the Kenyan diaspora, I'm talking about 3 million Kenyans who are resident outside the borders of Kenya. And okay, so basically these are the kind of things that we're talking about. Now, the remittances that we are also talking about. Now, the remittances, one of the SDG goals, the 17 goals that have just been passed in UN, we are talking about the goal number 8, the goal number 8.8, and we are saying that by 2030, how can we reduce the cost of remittances? We have in Africa, for example, to transfer money from West Africa to East Africa, it is costing over 20%, $200, you use $32 to transfer money from Nigeria to Kenya. It is a big hindrance to development. And we are saying that, can we now work in fora when we go to the Africa EU fora, when we are at the multi-sectoral level, for the next 15 years, how can we be talking about reducing the cost of remittances? In Kenya, we have the African Institute of Remittances, which is being hosted by my country. How can it come up with policy that will ensure that the cost of remittances is reduced? So these are the kind of things that we are saying we are talking about. And Kenya as a country, we have taken this mandate, and we are saying that within the next 5 years, we want to see air is operational, and we want to see that we have a target of even 5% within the African continent. So how can the Africans come in place and make sure this? And lastly, to conclude, I like the Indian model of dealing with the diaspora. Now, the Indian model is a model whereby the diaspora are recognized and they are given some sort of special passes. And I'm saying the African governments should also do the same. You hold a unique position here in the diaspora. When you come to go back to your countries, what kind of special considerations are you given? And I think the Indian model is a model that we should be talking about at summits so that it is adopted for the African diaspora. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. There will, of course, still be time to speak. I just wanted to not, it's horrible to cut such a rich discussion already, but I wanted to let all the other panelists still introduce themselves, and then we will absolutely return back to discuss more still about the various ways ahead and what should be done. So if you allow me, I will give the word to Mr. John Kellogg, please.
My name's John Kellogg. I'm the advisor for fundamental rights issues and policies at the European Union's Agency for Fundamental Rights. Agency for Fundamental Rights is basically an independent body created by the European Union to advise it on, obviously on human rights issues, and also on broader issues related to racism, xenophobia, integration, cohesion issues. The work of the agency, I would say, is probably on migration is split into two areas. We could say one area is what happens at the border, and that's a lot of work we do on asylum procedures, reception facilities for migrants coming into the EU, and to ensure that when migrants come, they're treated with dignity and that the procedures conform with human rights standards. That's one aspect. The other aspect is the work that we do within the European Union, which is primarily based around outcomes related to social cohesion. So we do a lot of work on things like, as I say, racism. Next year we'll have the second of one of our regular surveys on migrants and minorities' experiences within the European Union. And there we look at issues like employment, education, housing, police, how you react with the police, etc., etc. And the other thing we're trying to push forward is more on the integration issues. Here, in the past, we've done work with local authorities and looked at different integration models from the different member states and tried to look at what are the best practices, what works, what doesn't work, is there anything other countries can learn. And as you can imagine, this is particularly important at this moment in time where you've got these increase of numbers coming into the European Union, and some of them will be going to countries where the experience of integration is at best pretty limited. So I think there's a role for the agency around these issues. And also what we're also looking at is issues related to the EU's key priorities around what they call their growth strategy around 2020, where we talk about inclusive growth. And for us, part of that inclusive growth must mean that everyone within the European Union, including migrants and minorities, participate in the growth strategies of the European Union. But I'll leave it there because, as you say, we'll come back later on. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Then I would like to give the word to Yvonne Diallo-Sali, please.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Marlene. Is it working? Yes. I'm very pleased to be here and to spend the day with you. Very interesting discussions. And I'm particularly happy for, I would say, 3 reasons. One, it's the first meeting that many of us hold and exchanges since the Agenda 2030 has been officially passed. I think we'll come back to that at a later point. I'm also happy to see so many different actors represented: civil society, diaspora organizations, governments, international organizations, etc., etc. I think it's a unique moment to exchange and to be able to share experiences, challenges, but also best practices. And I think that's what we should focus on, to exchange on where we have opportunities to do something. The word opportunities, I work in the Global Program Migration and Development, where I'm heading the Diaspora portfolio with the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation as part of the Swiss Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We believe that migration is a very positive factor for development if the conditions are safe, if there's safe conditions for migration, and if the required framework conditions exist. We have the mandate to tackle migration at different levels. On the one hand, at global level, but also feeding the global discussions with concrete, practical experiences. So we have been very much involved in contributing to the 2030 agenda to make sure that migration is recognized in the different sectors where need be. And at the same time, we work and we support in different parts of the world, in a number of regions, civil society. We work with partner governments, with international organizations, to make this link between what happens at local, national level, but also became clear again during the day. It's very important to look at all the different levels when we talk about diaspora engagement, when we talk about the potential of migration. So we believe it's very important to look at what happens at the country of origin level. What do the governments do in order to have that engagement? We've heard an example from Kenya. It's also important to see what does the civil society do want and to envision in terms of engaging with its nationals abroad, and of course supporting supporting in countries like through programs like this one, connecting people of countries of destination and making the link with different African countries in this sense. One very last thing, and it's the last one, is to put numbers into perspective. I won't go into detail in terms of what we discussed, crisis, not crisis, when is something a crisis, but I would like us to remind, we've seen the example from Turkey hosting actually a huge number of millions of refugees compared to how many people come to Europe. Same applies to the African continent. 90% of Africans moving, being mobile, are mobile within the region and are a huge potential to development and are part of the market, are part of the development that also just applies for West Africa, for example, where multiple examples exist, and only a minority of people.
Let's go back then to a European perspective. I would like to give the floor to Ms. Stine Hylleskär from the European Commission.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I just want to follow up on what my colleague here said. I spent the past 5 years in Jordan, and also Jordan is hosting a lot of migrants and more than 600,000 Syrians. So again, I think questioning the whole terminology of crisis is very, very important at the outset. I work for the European Commission, but of course the European Commission is not one entity. We have many different departments within the European Commission. I work for the development arm of the European Commission. We also have a ministry, or we call them Directorate General, dealing with migration and home affairs. We have a department dealing with humanitarian interventions called ECHO. We have lots of different institutions at the European level. We have the Council, we have the European Parliament, as you heard referred to earlier. So in terms of migration, in the past, it's been migration and development, and the nexus between migration and development, it has been in the past treated as rather separately. And I think within the past 5 years, we have increasingly recognized the link between the two, and that we cannot look at the two things separately. Migration has an impact on development, and development has an impact on migration. Finish here. Maybe just to mention in the end that there's an upcoming conference. I think one of the colleagues referred to it this morning. It might have been mentioned by the AU if they were here. There's a migration conference coming up in Malta in November. I think it's on the 14th and 15th. This will tackle the root causes of irregular migration in Africa. So stability and irregular causes of irregular migration in Africa. So again, an opportunity, the perfect opportunity for diaspora organizations to be heard. And a trust fund will be established and publicly declared at this conference, where there will be lots of opportunities. And I know we had a discussion earlier about the potential for corruption or the potential for difficulties with funding for diaspora organizations. But I think also in terms of all your development activities, I think it's key and an opportunity really to seek funding for you who are here today and for the platform. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Then last but absolutely not least, Jibril Fall, you're here again, of course, on this final panel. What would you like to say to the way forward and the role of ADEPT?
Couple of things mentioned. For example, Washington's mentioned the role of the diaspora maybe in lobbying within the EU. I think the platform would particularly want to play a role in that. On matters that are sort of transnational, the platform can be a representative in that sense, but on specific country level, the platform can also help find the experts and people with knowledge relating to Kenya or Cameroon or whatever, and the diaspora from those countries to work with their countries of origin. In terms of, we did mention the summit, the Valletta Summit in November. The second Diaspora Development Forum, this is the third one. The second one was in May, and it was also in Malta. And it was, again, looking at irregular and what we then call dysfunctional migration. That is, when migration is actually bad for every party. And the reason why we thought we would introduce that is because if we don't, us the pro-migration people, if we don't debate the difficult part amongst ourselves, the anti-migration people will indeed debate it for us, and they would set the agenda and the tone, which I can promise you will not be to our benefit. In terms of the way forward, that's also my view, that we shouldn't just be complaining that we don't like the narrative. We have to offer an alternative narrative and then push for that to see whether that's acceptable. So at this stage, those are the comments I would make. I have had conversations during the day, and some people had suggested that some of the points mentioned throughout the day, we should see whether we can capture it in a form of communique. And I've taken the liberty of just drafting 6 brief points, which perhaps later on we can put on the slide and just have a look at. Thank you.
Excellent. So we heard already that from the European Commission side there will be a trust fund and funding will increase. So whether or not we call this a crisis or not, we know that the attention is much more on migration currently, and that this can also be an opportunity. I actually would like to ask Ada if this is also an opportunity or a challenge. The crisis is very much perceived here in Austria.
As an African, I'm rather incompetent when it comes to languages, because I speak only 2 languages, and most Africans speak an average of 4 or 5. But interestingly, the 2 languages I speak are very subtle. That's English and Wolof. And in both languages, I can insult you today, you will not know till tomorrow when you wake up. And one of the rudest things in Wolof, one of my languages, is short-termism or short memory. And the insult they use for short memory or short-termism is that they would say, oh, you are like a stomach. The implication being the stomach has no gratitude for yesterday's food. Now, what I think we should try to move away from, and this is the narrative I think we should put, is avoid the short-termism and have gratitude for yesterday's things that are important. So the 4 or 5 points that I've got here, I don't know whether you can start connecting. We were trying to connect it on, but it was a bit distracting. So I read on whilst you try to connect it.
DIASPORA youth organization that is present in 29 countries of the Council of Europe. I would like to thank Madame Ildeker to encourage us to be included in to get involved in the Rabat and Khartoum process, and I look forward to finding the channels for Adin to be included. But I also would like to mention another scope, because those processes are focusing on migration, and we have like the joint Africa-Europe strategy, that is Youth Leader Summit, and through that channel, it was a side event, we could reach the heads of state and government. And because that
operating project, but now I want to be sure if I have good understood, so that all the people here have good understood that there's a feasibility study is running. If I am good informed, if we say it is MPD,
for this communique, which was a very quick follow-up.
It was your idea
of the discussion. So I would actually, it's amazing to see it, and I think it's very important actually to have something to take us further. my first, and also I would like to thank for the comment on engagement in politics. In terms of your own experience and thinking of you as individuals, what would be a priority that you would put on your own institution's agenda, but thinking about you as individuals? So get out of the and then the second question, building upon this communique.
Rather than Africa-Europe Diaspora Development Platform. And of course, in English and in some languages, suggest ability and competency, which is sort of the communication we want to put across. The diaspora organizations they are adept in what they're doing. ADEPT is not an acronym. It is a concept with connotations of skills, proficiency, ability, and expertise, consistent with the platform's mission of enhancers would elect a full board. So the interim board, it's got some of 3 of the 5 people, their photos are there, and we've got their profiles. Then it has the 5 staff, and so roughly this is what we've got. Again, like every good website, it's never finished because there's bits to do. But this would go live, I don't know, next week. So they're just doing the final tweaking, but we just wanted you to see it. And as soon as it goes live, we would be inviting people to log in.
Continuing networking part, so it will be outside. We serve a little wine and some snacks. And we have another hour to stay with you here. And then with the guests, I have the pleasure to invite you. We move on then to another place, but we have now time to have an informal networking meeting here outside. Thank you all for being with us. It was a long day, but I think it was very interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.